9 seasons in the NBA, and right now he's with the Santa Cruz Warriors. It is Jeremy Lin. What's up, man? Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited. This is pretty cool.
Okay, so let's start where you're at now. You're putting up numbers, although I've had a long-standing theory. Like, you're putting up good numbers. You're hitting threes, assists, 20 a game. I've always kind of made a joke, like whenever I'm watching League Pass and they'll show some of the prospects in the G League, it'll be like, so-and-so had 38 and 20. And I'm like, everybody seems to be getting buckets in that league. And I'm not saying that, but where are you now with all of your accomplishments? You're still only 32. I know you want to get back in the league, so I want to cover it all. But where are you right now kind of taking this step in your hopefully NBA career?
I think for me, I'm just in a place where I just feel great physically, mentally, and I feel better for sure, without a doubt. I feel healthier than I ever was, and I feel mentally way beyond where I ever was. And I think that's the biggest intriguing thing is, when I was growing up, one of my coaches always said the game is 90% mental, and I was just like, "What are you talking about?" And he was a professional athlete, and he played in the minor leagues and in MLB and stuff like that. And he was like, the game is 90% mental. And I never understood what he was talking about growing up. And now I'm kind of like, no, I get it, because everyone at that elite level has talent and things like that, but it's the ones that have another level of confidence or another gear mentally, or the ones that can stay locked in or be consistent, and the ones that know what they're capable of and see it through. And so for me, where I'm at is I know what I'm capable of. I've gone through a lot of stuff in the past. I've been injured. I've worked hard to rehab from these injuries. I've gone through different experiences. I know who I am as a player, and I know I belong on the NBA floor. And so I'm just pursuing that right now. And, fresh off the G League bubble, I feel pretty good about everything. And I'm really proud of, the way that, not just me, but me and the Santa Cruz Warriors team was able to play. And one of the things I said at the end of the interview was like, man, I was a part of a G League team where we were all bought into the team. And that isn't always the case.
I don't know how you'd answer this, because I have it written down in my notes, but I know how athletes are. Like, if I ask, hey, are you a better player today than you were when you were going on your run? And you also want to get back in the league, so you're probably going to say yes. But can you give me a detailed version of what an answer like that would mean? I mean, you're only 32, so it's not like you can't still play, but the evaluation of you not being on an NBA roster, like, how does that all, when you really are critiquing your own game, where do you think you are now compared to the guy that was in the league for a long time?
Yeah, that's a great question. Of course, I'm going to say yes, but I think I would actually, encourage anybody who wants to know to look at the film or to understand and analyze the stats in terms of like where I'm at now. And I think the most obvious one is I've never shot it the way that I've shot it now. I made some changes to my form, and I made a lot of, headway in terms of mentally clearing myself so that I'm not coming onto the court with, all these different weights that were on my shoulder that I had. And that's a whole nother, topic or question that we can discuss later. But I'm coming into the court with more freedom and just lack of thinking or lack of, built up trauma from the past. And that's allowed me to just, use this new shot that we've been working on for the last few years. And so the percentages are way higher. The percentages are actually, I think I set a career high in every single shooting category in terms of field goal percentage. And, I think I shot like 50% from the field, 43% from three, and 88% from the free throw line. And so for me, that was a testament to everything, all the work that we put in, but also knowing that like, hey, I believe I'm a great shooter now, and I'm going, and I went out and it showed it. And that's one thing. And then obviously, if you compare who I was, what are the top three knocks that everybody was saying for me through my whole career? One was always shooting. Two was, can he drive left? And that was a huge knock. And if you watch again the G League footage, it's people are trying to force me left, but then they're realizing, oh, he's going in the left. He's shooting floaters now. Like, I'm not just getting to the rim. I'm shooting floaters. I'm shooting mid-range. Like, I can score at all three levels. And so, a lot of teams by the end, they were putting their small forward or power forward on me, or they're doubly teaming me at times. And so that was kind of just like, hey, I'm not as one dimensional. You can't just force me left and call it a night. And then the last one was defense. And for me, for us in the G League, the Santa Cruz team, we were second. We were the second place team, but we also had the second best defensive rating. And for me, just drawing charges, help side, communicating, talking, making sure we're all on the same page with the game plan and coverages, and being able to play defense. And that's something where I literally spent 2 to 3 summers, and it would be like we would do workouts where I never touched the ball. I was guarding the whole workout, 50 minutes, hour of just footwork or posture work or defensive slides and things like that. And so I think that's the cool part about it is I know that the top and the main perceived weaknesses of who I was as a player, I've been able to do a lot of work to undo those. And then the last one that we've heard a lot recently is health, right? Which is an interesting one to me because, I was hurt for 2 straight seasons, but now I've shown that I've been healthy for 3 straight seasons. But people are still talking about my health, which is always something that like I found really intriguing is like, look, I've shown you for 3 seasons now. And in the last off season, I've shown you for 2 straight seasons, there's footage that I'm healthy. Why is everyone still questioning my health? And that was always something that was really weird. And I remember I got hurt a day after Gordon Hayward, right? Like, and Gordon Hayward, no one's questioning his health 2 years after, 3 years after, like, and so that's why for me,
I think there'd be some people in Boston that would question his health.
Well, that's after he got re-hurt.
Right,
but I'm saying the initial injury, right? The initial injury after the first 6 months, you're kind of like, okay, how will he recover? What does he look the same? He doesn't look the same. And then after 6 months, 9 months, and a year, it goes on. And then it's like, okay, like he is who he is. He just signed a massive contract and he did a bunch of great things and he's healthy and he has the right to be called healthy because he's put a lot of work and he looks great. For me, it was just, this past offseason, a lot of things that teams were still talking to me about was like, are you healthy? And my agent was sending all types of film of me playing overseas last year and it still wasn't good enough. And so I feel like I had, people were like, look, a lot of what I was hearing from the NBA execs is, hey, if you really want to get back in the league and show that you're healthy and you can still play at a high level, you have to do it in the G League. And so that's what I did.
You mentioned, kind of getting your mind clear. So it sounds like baggage. What are we talking about here? It sounded like you wanted to talk about it. So I'm just.
Yeah, no. I appreciate that. Thanks for the assist. I think for me, when I was in China last year, as I was playing, I realized I was wrestling with a lot of fears that I didn't typically wrestle with. I remember there would be times in the game where I'd be like, oh, I hope I don't get put back in the game because, what happens if I go in the game and I screw it up? Or, oh, if it comes down to the last shot, like, and I miss it, oh man, like, and those are kind of things that I didn't think about. Like, growing up, it was always like, the last shot, you better give me the ball. Like, who else would shoot the last shot? And so I was wrestling with a lot of these different fears and I was like, where are these things coming from? Why am I thinking like this? And so I ended up getting like a sports coach or, a therapist basically. And one of the first things that he said is, if you want to get back to where you used to be mentally, you need to reconcile your past. And so that's what I had to do. I had to reconcile my past. I had to talk through all the different things, the injuries. I realized the injuries not just had a physical trauma. There was a longer lasting mental trauma that I had to go through. Believing that I could be the player that I used to be, believing all these different things. And then there was a lot of the trauma of like failed situations. Oh, I went to a team and I thought it was going to work out this way and it didn't work out this way. And so I started to feel like, oh, a lot of these cool scenarios or these new seasons are just setups for disappointment. And I was going in with these like preconceived notions like, oh, this isn't going to work out, or, oh, I'm not going to play my best, or all these different things that were coming from a lot of the experiences that I experienced as a basketball player in the NBA. And even one that was really, my family was kind of challenging me on this, like, hey, there's this thing about growing up Asian American and always having a chip on your shoulder. And always feeling like you have to do more to prove yourself. And if you have one bad game, everyone's going to jump ship and no one's going to believe in you. And so like I had this like big weight on my shoulder with a lot of the Asian American stuff of like, oh man, if I ever make one, like if I ever have one bad game, like I won't be able to recover from it. Or if I have one good game, that's never enough. I have to put together 3 straight good games, 4 straight good games until they actually believe me. or if I'm ever even with another player, I'll never be the one that gets that opportunity. I got to stand out like 2 steps above and beyond that next player that I'm competing for an opportunity. And so a lot of these things we had to talk through. And that was, so that was the first part, was reconciling the past.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second part was being able to move to a place and even do mental exercise and things where I was able to go beyond where I used to be. And so the first step was getting to where I used to be. And the second step was getting beyond that. And that's where I feel like now mentally, what people are seeing is like, one of the best compliments I got from somebody who watched the G League bubble was, he was like, when I watched you play, you exuded a peace and a joy that I have never seen you exude before. And I'm like, wow, I can't believe you could see that through the screen. Like watching me play basketball, like I had no idea someone could see that. Like, how do you even measure that? But he was just like, no, that was like very evident to me. And I was like, oh man, like this mental work is really working in terms of freeing myself up to just go and play, like, what they say, play in the zone.
Okay. So the news of the last week or so was the slur used against you in a game. And I know, I think at first when people saw the headline, they're like, okay, so what is this? And then your follow-up was perfect, because it's like, look, everybody can have their story, but to grow up Asian American and know that you're going to be bullied and now maybe somebody will stick up for you. Can you take us through that moment though? Like what actually, I know you're not going to share his name. I know the league and you've met with the player, so everything's being handled on that end, but what actually happened in the game?
We were just at a stop play and then, if I get into it too much, people might be able to figure it out. But it was just a chippy game. People were talking back and forth. And then basically the word was thrown out, coronavirus. And I didn't know if it was directed at me or whatever. So then, and my teammates didn't know either. And they had heard it too. And so we kind of, I was like, looking like, are you talking to me? And then I said like, oh bro, that's racist. And then, basically that was basically it. There was a little bit more, and then we just ended up playing a game, but it was during a certain situation in the game. And so it kind of came and went so fast. It was like really, really fast. And then we just finished the game. And that was it. And so I think even at the end, my teammates were kind of confused and they were asking me about it in the locker room. And I was a little confused because it happened so fast. But I mean, I think for me, again, like the biggest thing about it was just, it wasn't about, and that's the thing is like, that was the headline, right? That was the draw that everybody talked about. But in the Instagram post, it's like 30 sentences, and that was only one sentence, and it was a very vague sentence. Actually, the majority of what I want to talk about was just the violence that is happening towards Asian Americans, and to bring that out and to say that like, hey, I'm standing with you and I'm supporting anybody who is going through anything like this, or anybody who goes through, which, a lot of my Asian American friends and family, I mean, people tell me like, I don't even want to go to the grocery store. Like I'm scared to go to the grocery store because I don't know, what's going to happen, or if people are going to look at me sideways or do something crazy. And so that's a very real issue. Of people being scared to go out, and so that's really like what I wanted to bring awareness around. But then it kind of grew legs of its own in terms of what had happened to me on the court, and so that's where we are now.
What about I'd imagine it's got to be frustration, because I think there's I shouldn't frame it as athlete, but there's just like a sense of, well, when you're out in the court, people say stuff. What's your response to that thought?
I understand it for sure because I'm a competitor. But I think, through certain instances, we've always kind of seen like, and you hear, it happens a lot, like every season in the NBA, it's like, no, I'm okay with trash talk. Like we were going back and forth, but then he said something about blank. And then those are kind of like the unwritten, but like known rules that like, oh, you don't broach that, right? Like you don't talk about my family. You don't talk about my children. You don't talk about my wife. Like that's what a lot of NBA players are all saying, right? Like, oh, once you talk about my wife, or once you talk about my mom, or once you talk about my child, like it's off limits. And so I think there are just certain unwritten rules that everybody kind of understands or should understand. But I definitely think trash talk is part of the game, and I think it's a fun part of the game. But I think there also has to be discretion.
I want to go back because we're 9 years removed from it, which seems crazy. And that run with the Knicks, and I was going through the game log this morning, and I have a couple questions about it. I know you've talked about it nonstop, but I just you're good at telling stories. So you played barely at all, at the beginning of the season, and then you played against Boston, and you played like 6 minutes, right? You get a couple points, and then the next game against New Jersey, you get 25. And here goes this run for 3 weeks where I'm looking at the scoring again, 25, 28, 23, 38. You had that game winner, right? That was the Toronto game where you had 27, 26, 28, 21. I mean, this 3 week stretch of just putting up huge numbers. What do you now think about when you think back at that run?
Now I appreciate it more, and I'm like, man, that was history. Like that was legitimate history. Most points scored in the first 4 or 5 starts of anybody ever in the NBA history. And the run that we were on, and the style we were playing, and the swag that we were playing with, and just for us, we were such an underwhelming team prior to that in terms of the expectations versus what was actually happening. And then everybody bought in, and then like it was just. I mean, there's just so many things that happen that like you kind of take for granted as you're going through it. You're like, yeah, for sure. But then it's like when you go on teams, and then after that, it's like going on teams where like, you have underwhelming expectations, but then you don't rally, right? And you don't do that. Or like maybe you have 1 or 2 really explosive games, but then you don't have that 3rd or 4th one. And so a lot of things that I kind of just took for granted then, like I don't take for granted now. I'm like, wow, that really was incredible. And at the same time, it was just like, it's so funny because like the night before in Boston, I remember one of the assistant coaches like, we're going to use you tonight. We're going to put you into the game. I was like, what? And he's like, don't try to do too much. Okay. And I was like, okay. And so I didn't do anything that night. I was just, everything's safe. Oh, just pass the ball. Don't drive to the basket. Don't turn it over. And it was just like, I didn't play my brand of basketball. And then in the next game, it was just like, my agent was like, you got to go and you got to play Jeremy Lin basketball. And that's downhill. That's downhill. That's attacking. That's constantly putting pressure on the defenders, constantly putting pressure in the paint. And like, I was just like, oh my goodness. It kind of felt like the sea just parted in terms of like, I was just getting into the lane nonstop. And that's what ended up happening game after game after game was just the spacing, the pace that we were playing at, the pick and rolls, the way that everything was set up. We had a dynamic roller in Tyson Chandler. We had a dynamic roller in Amari Stoudemire. And we had spot shooters all over the place. And then we had certain players who were great at cutting. We had everything kind of just flowing. And it was just like this perfect storm of just, player talent, team chemistry, role and fit, great coaching. Like it was just everything that flowed together.
Okay. Did you have moments where you're like, is this fake? Like I got 28 and now tomorrow it's all going to be over. Like, did you have moments of going, I'm having a hard time believing I'm on this kind of run?
Oh, for sure. I mean, that first game, so my career high up until that point was 12 points. Right, my rookie year, and then I went to the Knicks. So in the Boston game, like you said, I had like 6 points or something. But like in the first game, when I got put into the game against the Nets, that breakout game, I remember I came in and I had 4 points, and like in like the first 5-6 minutes, and so you're start of the second quarter or like midway through the second quarter, I have like 4 points, and I'm like thinking to myself like, this is a great game. This is already a great game. This is a great half. I have 4 points. Like, that's a lot.
You had 2 against Boston, by the way. You missed every shot you took.
Oh, I had 2 points. See? So I was like, okay, I have 4. I already surpassed yesterday, and I'm already a third of the way to my career high. Like, when your career high is 12 points, if you score 2 points in a game, you're feeling good. So I had 4 points at the start of the second quarter, and I'm like, dude, I'm good. I'm good here. Like, and then I had 8 at half. I remember this vividly. I had 8 points at half, and I'm like, if I don't score, I literally said to myself, like, if I don't score again this half, like, it's still a solid game. I had 8 points. And then the second half came around, and it was just like, and I just got in the zone. I stopped worrying about my contract and whether I was going to be guaranteed or not. I stopped worrying about, okay, well, if I get cut for the third time this season, where am I going to go? Or I stopped worrying about, like, okay, well, if I try to make this move or shoot this shot, what will my teammate think? Or what will my coach think? Or what will my assistant coach think? Like, am I doing too much? Am I doing too little? Like, I just let all of that go, and I just played. And by the grace of God, like, I ended up, just getting in that zone, and it was kind of just, it just flowed, and it was over from there in terms of just doing what I do.
Okay, so you're young, you're in New York City, you're a national headline, you're on the cover of the papers every day after a game. What was that like for you socially? I mean, there had to be buddies from school calling you up being like, hey, I think I'll come visit now. The city loves the Knicks. There had to be moments where it was weird, as if you all of a sudden were one of the biggest stars in the city in an unprecedented amount of time.
I couldn't even begin to express it to you or explain it to you. Like,
try.
It was, so before that game, I was walking around. I would walk around all the time, go to Papaya. I was sleeping on my brother's couch in Stuytown, and I would be in the elevator. I would see, all the residents who were living in that complex all the time, just going about my business. I'd try to get, I'd take a taxi every time to MSG for every game. Going to MSG, sometimes it would be like, who are you? This is only for players. I'm like, I'm a player. They're like, no, you're not. I'm like, I'm a player. This happened, and it was like, okay, let me in. That was like, and then like a week later, it's like, I can't go anywhere. I mean, after every game, it's 200 text messages, 300 text messages after games. I can't even sort it through. I mean, people are like, oh, Mark Zuckerberg's here at the game. He wants to meet you. What? Who? Mark? Oh, are you Mark Zuckerberg? Oh my goodness. Oh, so-and-so wants to get on this interview. Da, 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 da. Or like, I would go to a steakhouse with the teammate. I remember like, hey, let's go eat. my financial advisor wants to take you to eat. I was like, okay, cool. We go to a steakhouse. We walk in, and I swear, it's everyone's in suit and ties. Everybody stands up and gives a standing ovation as we walk through the restaurant. I'm like, it's like, I can't even make this stuff up. Next thing you know, I'm just trying to go to brunch at some random place with a couple of teammates. And when we come out, the entire school next to us, all the kids were waiting for us. And there was paparazzi, everyone taking photos. I mean, this is all within the span of like a few days. And so when you talk about like, it actually is like one of those movies where like I took a pill and then like I became somebody else and was living in an alternate like universe or world. And like, that's actually what it was like.
So I remember, because I was doing the Daily Show with Van Pelt, and, we'd come back in after another game and be like, dude, he did it again, and then you're like, what? Like, what's going to happen here? And then I remember the Miami game. And I'll never forget watching LeBron and Wade defend you at the beginning of that game. And I think I even texted Van Pelt. I was like, it's as if Wade and LeBron were flipping a coin, arguing over who got to defend you. And they were like, enough of this shit. Do you remember that? And I have to imagine you were like, oh, whoa, wait a minute. Like, they were coming out and trapping you. Did you sense that those two guys were almost sick of you getting headlines and they were coming for you?
I mean, people told me like, they were arguing over who could guard me. They all wanted a piece of me. They all wanted to guard me. I mean, you could see even I would come off the screen. It wasn't just them. I would come off the screen, Chris Bosh hard hedge or Chris Bosh high up and then they would rotate and then it'd be Mario Chalmers and it'd be Norris Cole and it'd be back to Dwayne Wade. And it was just like the whole time, like I couldn't get any room to breathe. And I've never felt more like, oh, we're going to go stop that guy than in that game of like, they were out to get me. And they were obviously a great team and a great defensive team. And they more than succeeded that night. I mean, they were tremendous in their defensive effort. But it was definitely, I was just like, oh, wow. Like yeah, that definitely felt like I had a target on my back. And but I think that's fun, right? Like that's the fun part of basketball. That's the challenging part of basketball. Is like no one wants to run from that. You want the other team's best shot, and you want to be in a place where you give your best shot. It was just LeBron and Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh.
It didn't look like a lot of fun, but I understand. Right, I understand what you're saying. All right, the final thought on all this, because you still had really productive runs with other teams. Unfortunately, you always seem to be in another team every year, so it was hard for you to get settled. But the Knicks part of it, and I'd heard this story, so I don't know where your relationship is with Melo. I've always appreciated Melo. I think he's a terrific interview. I've always said that. But that there was, once he came back, because he had missed time that year, that he was like, okay, look, you paid me all this money. We're not running the offense through Jeremy Lin on a high screen the entire game. So was there, you may have gotten along with him, but was there any basketball conflict there once he came back and was like, look, are we seriously going to do this and have me be the second option?
I felt like, honestly, everyone kind of understood, because it wasn't just him. Like, I think Amare needed certain things too, right? And so we sat down, we all ate together, and we kind of talked about, it was, me, Melo, Amare, and Tyson. We all kind of talked about what we wanted, and I think we had to just figure out how to flow, right? And I think I'm not comparing it in a sense like, oh, that team is equivalent to what I'm about to say now, but I'm saying it's a similar concept of like when you had brought that Miami Heat team together, or when like KD joined the Warriors or whatever. It's like you can always see there's this stretch of time where everyone's trying to figure out, okay, how do I find out how to be me, but at the same time not take away from anybody else. And again, I'm not saying that me, Melo, Mare, and Tyson are the equivalent of any of these other teams that I mentioned. I'm just saying there is a huge part of like, how do I fit in, but not fit in so much that I don't do anything. And there's like that balance. And so we were all just trying to figure it out. And to be honest, like we did well. Like even when they came back, like we were still winning games, and we pushed from 11th or 12th place all the way up to like 6th or 7th place in the rankings. And so we actually accomplished a good amount. And then, D'Antoni resigned, and then I ended up getting knee surgery and stuff like that. And so the season kind of ended in a different way, but we still made it to the playoffs. And we still had a lot of success. It's just that part of the story is kind of people just kind of forget about or is glossed over.
Yeah, because it was the Heat. I mean, the Heat were the headliners there. And, I know some other teams are still hanging on, but it's fun. I was going back and watching it a lot this morning, and it's, I don't want to, this would sound negative. I don't want to say fairy tale in the negative way, like, because it happened. It wasn't a fairy tale, but you got to kind of walk on NBA water there for a while in a way very few players ever have. And I'm rooting for you, and I hope we get to see you again. I hope we get to see you in the league again.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.